Good morning, student. Today, in chapter number 3, our next topic is gender literacy and culture. This is part number 4 of this chapter. Now, gender literacy and culture. First of all, I am telling you about the structure of family. There was widespread prevalence of the nuclear families. It means people on that time they liked the nuclear families. Adult son did not live with their parents, and it was exceptional for adult brothers to share a common household. Slaves were, however, included in the family. So this type of the structure of the family we saw at the time of Roman Empire. Now the status of woman on that time, which type of the status of the woman? The woman enjoyed considerable legal rights in owning and managing property. They were married off in the late teens or early 30s. Arranged marriage was the general norms. Women were often subject to domination by their husband. It means that husbands dominated their wives. Wives were being beaten up by their husbands even also. So husbands on that time were too much dominating. It means we saying that uh, the men dominating societies. The typical form of marriage was one where the wife did not transfer to her husband's authority but retained full rights in the property of her natal family. Women remained a primary heir to father's property after marriage. They could become independent property owners after their father's death. Divorce was easy for both men and the woman. The divorce was relatively as easy and needed more than a notice to intent to dissolve the marriage by either husband or wife. On other hand, whereas the males married in their late 20s in the early 30s, women were married off in the late teens, I just told you, or the 20s. So we saw the gap between the husband and the wife that this would have encouraged the certain inequalities. Now the literacy. The what about it is certain that the rates of casual literacy varied greatly between different parts of the empire. Literacy was widespread in army officers, estate managers, and the soldiers. Casual literacy existed and it varied from place to place. There was a wall of the Pompeii which carried advertisement and graffiti which indicates high level of the casual literacy on that time. Uh, I'm giving example by contrast in Egypt, where hundreds of the papyri survive. Most formal documents, such as the contracts, if we the contract were usually written by the professional scribes. Scribes means writers, and they often tell us that X or Y is unable to read and write. But even here, literacy was certainly more widespread among certain categories such as the army, I just told you, army officers, soldiers, and state managers. Now, the cultural diversity. Which type of the culture we saw in the Roman Empire? The cultural diversity of the empire was reflected in many ways and in many at many levels. In the vast diversity of the religious cults and local deities, the plurality of the language and that were spoken, I just told you that different type of the people lived in this vast area from Europe to Africa. They spoke different type of the languages, their diets, their cults, their religious beliefs, all their dresses, all these things were different from one areas to the another. Now the food the people ate, the forms of the social organization, and their types of settlements all reflected in the culture uh, diversities. Different languages were spoken in the different areas. Most of the linguistic cultures were purely oral, at least until a script was invented for them. At as late as 5th century, the Armenian began to be used as written form of the language. In other areas, the spread of Latin displaced the other widespread written from the languages. Aramaic was the dominant language group of the Near East. Coptic was spoken in Egypt, Punic and the Berber in the North Africa, Celtic in Spain and in the Northwest even also. But many of these linguistic languages was purely oral languages. That was not, they haven't any script for this one. The Armenian, for example, only began to return as late as in the 5th century. So, in this way, we see that they had the different type of the languages. Their dresses were different. They ate different type of the food. Their deities, their religion, their beliefs, their faiths, everything. So a large variety of the diversity, culture diversities we saw in the at the time of the Roman Empire. Okay, thank you, student.